Today on the Intimacy Inquiry, I'm thrilled to be joined by Koby Falks, a gay Australian adult content creator, OnlyFans entrepreneur, and advocate for LGBTQ plus representation. Known for blending authenticity with bold storytelling, Koby shares insights on masculinity, sexuality, and thriving in the adult entertainment industry. He's here hopefully to inspire confidence, break stigmas, and help listeners embrace their true selves. He's built a career that blends boldness, self expression, and a deep understanding of the evolving digital landscape. Through his work, he challenges toxic masculine stereotypes and promotes confidence and self acceptance within the LGBT community and wider. So you do a hell of a lot, really. So
Sounds like it.
it does, doesn't it? Yeah, that's a nice intro. There's a lot I want to ask you. So I did want to, if it's okay, I did want to take you back a little bit and just
Sure.
understand a little bit about who you were growing up. What was school like in Queensland? How were your family and friends when you came out? How was all that in sort of, because
Yeah.
you weren't on the coast in Queen, you were sort of small town Queensland, is that right?
I grew up in the outback, yeah. So,
Okay.
like central Queensland, like
Mhm.
talking like dirt roads and an hour to anywhere. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, like I was in sort of Emerald, which is a country town, so it's a mining
Mhm.
town,
Yep.
and spent some time in Mount Isa as well, where my parents are from. And yeah, generally. That's where most of my family still is, very much in that mining sort of industry. And
Mhm.
growing up in the outback was obviously, a bit of an experience because I think, like for all small country town children, you make your own fun.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the most vivid memories I remember of growing up in Emerald was my dad taking us to the only place that had green grass at the time for picnics, which was the cemetery. It was the only,
Good to
it
get
was
used to
the,
that bit while he's still alive, I guess. Wow, okay.
it's the only place that had trees and grass. Everything else was, like Australian bush, which is quite,
Yeah,
quite harsh.
absolutely.
And then I actually moved to regional Tasmania just in my early teens. So my family uprooted us because they were sick of the heat and just felt like they needed to change. And we ended up on the east coast in Tasmania in another small farming town called Fingal. And yeah, it was kind of like the same but different because it was yet another small town, but completely different in every aspect from weather and
Mhm.
scenery and stuff. So it was great. So I know Tasmania like the back of my hand. I spent a lot of time bushwalking, a lot of
Mhm.
time exploring some of the remotest parts of the state. And my parents are still there today, and I actually was just there for Easter, and I love it. So. And I actually didn't come out like you touched on school,
Mm.
primary school for me. Like there was nothing really unusual for me in primary school. It was pretty standard. Um, we years 1 to 6. I was at the same school. I do remember, because the heat was so intense in Emerald that we would walk to school and our footprints would be left in the bitumen road because it would be melting during the day. And then I guess when I started high school, which was actually in Tasmania,
Mhm.
I felt quite indifferent. I did start to realize that I was a little bit different, and I kind of got really into sport just because I was I was never into group sport, but I got into a lot of swimming, a lot of
Mhm.
state athletics and actually, the gym. I got into the gym quite early as well, and sort of I've always found to really sort of that I like to push myself as opposed to participate in group sports. I find group
Yep.
sports I I don't connect well, but if I set myself a PB, a personal best, I'm psychologically much more push myself.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time swimming in high school. And then from there, I guess I didn't really come out until I left school. So
Okay.
I was in year 12 and I actually went to enlist in the Navy, and that was when I sort of came out to my best friends at the time.
Mhm.
I sort of, mum and dad sort of caught wind of it as well. And I guess for me, it was sort of a way, I always knew that I was gay growing up quite early on.
Yeah.
And it was something that I hid, but escaping to the Navy was sort of my way of being able to leave Tasmania and enter the world.
Mhm.
And I felt like it was just a good time to be able to say that as well, because it meant that should I be rejected or whatever, I wasn't at home and going to be kicked out. I was sort of independent. So
Yeah, yeah.
mm.
And were your folks, I guess, coming from small town Queensland, small town Tasmania, and I grew up in a very small town in the UK, and I didn't knowingly know anybody that was gay until I moved to London when I was 18. So they might not have known anybody that was knowingly gay before
Mm.
you came out. How were they with you when you did they respond how you wanted to, or what?
Well, I mean, to give context, I was born in the 80s, and
Yeah,
we're talking about
yeah,
rural Queensland and mining towns. Very hard
yeah,
environment, very
yeah.
blokey, very masculine.
Hmm.
And then Tasmania as well, again, farmland, another coal mining town. I guess it'd be like living in Wales, sort of thing in the
Yeah,
UK,
yeah,
quite remote. But again,
hmm,
very masculine, very blokey.
yeah.
And it was also illegal to be gay in Tasmania right up until I think 97. So,
Wow, wow.
it wasn't necessarily that they enacted on those laws, but it's just the
Yeah,
laws
yeah, but
hadn't caught up
hadn't
with the
been taken
time.
off the books.
Yeah, I mean, you can still be drunk and drive a horse and wagon as well, but they've they've changed that rule, that law as well.
Thankfully. Yeah, it's like, which one should we change? Legal to be gay or legal to be good drive? Oh, I don't know. Let's go with the driving one. That's okay.
But like obviously growing up, I didn't have role models, I didn't have visibility, or I didn't have representation within my line of sight. Internet was quite limited. We didn't have phones like you
Yeah.
do today, or social media or anything like that. So I grew up knowing that I was different, and I guess the best way to put it would be like I'd be with my cousins, I'd be with friends, and they would see like the girl across the road, and I wouldn't even notice her. You know what I mean? And be
Yeah.
like, why am I not noticing what they're noticing, kind of thing. And so that's kind of how, I started to realize I was a little bit different.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess not having that visibility or that representation is too then just meant to started to questioning what was wrong with me.
Yeah. That's quite hard. And I know that this will get more positive, I promise. But I know that your first gay relationship was sadly an abusive one.
Yes.
Firstly, how did you recognize it was abusive? And how did you break away and become, yeah, the person you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my first relationship, which was abusive, came about because I didn't have the experience of dating in high
Yeah.
school. I didn't have the normal
Hmm.
trajectory where people engage with relationships, in their teenage years. So for me, I sort of met this guy while I was in the Navy. He was older than me. He was sort of my wet dream in a way. He
Hmm.
was very built, he was very masculine. And so everything that sort of, that I always envisaged. Um, but yeah, the relationship did start to break down very quickly within the first 6 months and become sort of physical. And because I was away from home, I was by myself and I
Mm.
was younger, I didn't really have the skills or the tools to pick up what
Hmm.
was right or what was wrong and what was worth fighting for, what was worth staying. And so, I put up with it for quite some time until it got to the point where, it had to be intervened by the courts essentially.
Oh
And
gosh.
yeah, so that, wasn't the best introduction into into my
No.
foray into relationships. But I think generally, that toxicity there, and it came about really because for he himself as well, he's Macedonian, so he grew up in a very sort of,
Okay.
a very sort of
Hmm.
household that had a lot of expectations on how men should be, and they should be a
Yeah.
certain way. And so, that obviously carried across into our relationship where it suddenly like I'm dealing with his trauma, and then because I was new and not even really out at the time as well, I was still grappling with
Mm.
my identity and just not knowing, what does a healthy relationship look like for two men? Because there wasn't anything on display, or there wasn't anywhere to say that this is like what a pillar of a healthy relationship for two men looks like. We've
Yeah.
all been told with the nuclear family,
Hmm.
but I think at the time, what I can only think of two TV series that were on. It was like Queer as Folk and Will and Grace. And, one was full of drugs and the other was high camp, so there wasn't
Yeah,
exactly.
I know. Not neither of which were strictly accurate. I think.
No,
Yeah.
so so there wasn't a lot of resource to go on to be like, actually, this I need to make some changes.
I must admit, I did used to love the character of Karen. Now, I think she's one of
Oh, well, I feel
TV's
like
great
Will
characters.
and Grace sort of became Karen and Jack.
It absolutely did, and yeah, she was just fabulous, really. Yeah, I love her. So when you were in the Navy, were you allowed to be out in the Navy, or was it like in the UK and the US at the time? It wasn't legal to be in the Navy or Army if you were
Um,
gay.
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, because it wasn't discussed,
Okay.
and it wasn't as woke as today in terms of
Uh-huh.
government policy and that for recruitment and diversity and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of that. But it definitely was not illegal because, and definitely wasn't frowned upon because there was a gay guy a few cabins up from me, and
Uh-huh.
and he would. I remember him leaving his cabin wearing chaps, because leather chaps, because he was heading out for the night into Melbourne.
Yeah,
But I still, it was, the Navy was a very, a bit of a boil pressure cook situation. You're there with a lot of guys, you're showering together, you're doing PT, you're going to
yeah.
courses together, like you're training together, you're
Uh-huh.
shooting together, whatever. And so, I didn't, there's that very strong thing of forming bonds within the team and that. So,
Yeah.
I didn't want to disrupt that and be outcast. So I did
Uh-huh.
feel kind of, I never really felt fully involved with the unit, I guess,
Yeah.
because I did feel that, like, if I was my true self, they would reject me and I wouldn't be
Uh-huh.
accepted. And so I had
Mm.
to do what I always did, and that was hide myself. I always talk about, like, wearing masks.
Yeah.
Growing up, I could never be myself around people. Um,
Uh-huh.
and that's really hard because when you're growing up within your family unit, I have a younger brother, a younger sister as well. Your parents, they love you, obviously, well, as they should. But for me, they loved me, but they didn't love me. They loved the version of me that I let them see. And
Yeah.
so, I would always have this mask on because I would have to, I didn't want to give myself away. I didn't want to out myself. And that's really hard because you think, well, growing up, if I am me, I'm going to be rejected for me. So I have to put this front on. And you become very good at it. And it gets to the point where you're not even thinking and you can just shift and put these masks on. And, that's what I've kind of did my whole life is wear these certain masks. And it wasn't
Mm.
until I came out that my relationship with my parents they really started to get to know the real me in my 20s. Like, they'd gotten to know my brother and sister their whole
Yeah.
lives. I started 20 years later, that they actually then got to actually talk and see me. But even today, it's still hard to not put those masks on because it's just habitual,
Yeah.
and tense up and read the room and be like, oh, have I, if will I be rejected if I say what I'm really thinking or being myself or whatever, whatever. Hmm.
I mean, I think there's obviously a really clear link between the fact you weren't comfortable in team sports because you have to pretend to be something else. You weren't necessarily
Mm,
comfortable in the army team, or the navy team rather.
mm.
Always about being an individual. And it's from again, this sounds so naive, and apologies, but from the outside, looking at you, a big beefy guy, really solid, could sort of, knocking everybody out in a second, sort of thing. You think, well, how's that guy going to have any insecurities or anything else? And it's really not, is it? We do put on that armor and mask or whatever the type is, whether it's the clothes we wear or the car we drive or the body that we have. It's all portraying an image that we want to project to the world. And then when you actually get with somebody and you actually talk to them properly, you think, wow, gosh, this guy is really, yeah, struggling with what's inside, really. Because no matter
Yeah.
how no matter how much you can bench or how big your delts are, or whatever, it's still is that, yeah, somebody saying, yeah, I'm not going to fit in here. And
Mm.
when did you? Well, hopefully you do, but when did you feel you first fitted in and could really be who you wanted to be, and you didn't have to change who you were?
To be honest, since I started OnlyFans.
Wow. Okay.
So, once I came out, in my 20s, I guess, like I was saying, how people kind of plod through their teenage years in testing relationships with girlfriends and
Yeah.
boyfriends. They're finding their identity. They go through phases or whatever. Whereas, I was constantly putting masks on. So all of a sudden, when I came out, I didn't have an identity. I like, who
Yeah.
am I? All of a sudden I'm out, I can be me, but what does me look like?
Yeah.
You
Yeah. You've got
know?
it. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Really
so,
weird.
one obviously the natural sort of precursor to that is then going into the queer community.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden I'm out, so I'm going to gay bars, I'm going
Yeah.
to venues with drag, I'm going to like parties on the weekends with other gay people. And the queer community has quite a well, what am I trying to say is that they have their own identity. They
Yep.
have their things that they celebrate, and they
Mhm.
they have their different stereotypes within that community. And so they start to pigeonhole you quite early on as to like where you fit within the
Yeah.
community. Are you a bear? Are you a twink? Are you a
Yeah.
daddy? Are you
Uh-huh.
this? Are you that? And if you don't quite fit in, you've kind of changed yourself to fit into a clique.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily true to you. You're kind of fitting into the ideals of that community and what they portray.
Mm.
The other thing I noticed is that masculinity in the queer community is sometimes not always really accepted. It's quite taboo, or it's seen as toxic and rejected. And
Mhm.
often, it makes a lot of sense because for people, it is often those masculine role models who reject us for being gay when we were younger, such as the father figures or your colleagues or whatever. So
Yeah.
there is quite a as soon as masculinity comes into it, people kind of tense up because they've had trauma with the alpha guys. All of our bullies
Yeah.
picked on us for being gay because and they were like
Mhm.
the masculine figures. Um, so being, for myself, obviously I grew up in Queensland. I'm quite a boy's boy, and so I didn't really fit into the queer community. So I sort of changed myself to fit into whatever clique it was, and
Yeah.
it wasn't.
The chameleon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then it wasn't until I started creating OnlyFans about 5 years ago, like I'm 40 now, that I had to kind
Wow.
of come up with a brand. And I was like, oh, like I want to play into my roots of what I always sort of
Uh-huh.
was, and I'm going to put that out there because, I'm not going to try and shy away from it. And yeah, I guess my brand as Kobe sort of starts to disrupt that, I'm showing that you can be masculine, but you can be emotionally available, you can be sexually versatile because, like it was seen as feminine to be the bottom. That's not the case. I am a bottom.
Yeah.
And you can still be deeply queer as well. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? 'Cause yeah, we don't necessarily have name groups in the same way in the sort of straight community and things. There's this, yeah, the sort of
No.
queer community sort of tends to have these, and you can literally walk into a bar or to go to a pride parade or whatever. You can literally pick out the little groups that are, yeah, and it's
Mm.
yeah, no, it's kind of weird. But I did want to talk about masculinity and toxicity, and I think at the moment in general, I think there's a big challenge for men, for teenagers. I've got a teenage son who's 15. I've got a daughter that's 18. I think there's I think there's a struggle at the moment to understand what masculinity is and
Mm,
almost what a man should be. And I talked to somebody the other day, and I just found this fascinating. They were saying that when people are asked when does a girl become a woman, they typically say when she starts her cycle, when she can have kids, when she's past puberty, whatever. When they ask when does a boy become a man, they say it was much more about behaviors and how because you can get 30-year-old guys that are boys still, really, that haven't really grown up, but it's not a physical thing that happens to men. Yes, we go through puberty and so we get hair and stuff, but to become a man, you've almost got to do something. You've almost got to, like, I guess in historically we had different tribes that would have rites of passage. You had to go and sort of kill a wildebeest or whatever. You had to go and drink this drink or whatever and go through this. And whereas for women it just happens. For
mm,
men, when you sort of become a man, so it's really hard to know what masculinity is now and what the role of men is. And sorry, that's a super
yeah.
philosophical hard question, but yeah, I'm just curious from your take. What do we say
Well,
to teenage boys that are struggling, whether they're straight or queer? What does it mean to become a man? What do you need to be and do, and how should you act?
yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question, and I don't have an answer for that. Unfortunately, I wish I did, but I mean, for me, it does sort of make sense what you're saying because I saw joining the Navy
Hmm.
as that it was a rite of passage. It was sort of
Yeah.
something to do that
Hmm.
is deeply masculine traditionally, like joining the military service. Stepping out of school, like picking up a gun,
Yeah.
going shooting kind of thing, gonna kill people,
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Yeah.
that
Whatever. Kill
in
people.
a way that is what you're
I
talking
don't know.
about
Yeah.
with that rite of passage.
Mm.
But like what is it? I think like today I find I think it would be really hard growing up in high school because when I grew up we had very defined gender roles and
Yeah.
they had a particular they had a structure around them. Today, there's obviously, we know that gender is a social construct and that can be extremely fluid and you can dip in and
Yeah.
out. And then you combine that with all the different sexualities as well.
Yeah.
People in high school now, because being gay is not frowned upon, but neither is being you don't either have to be a man or a woman now in high school
Yeah.
either. So you can start to explore this fluidity and whatever. So the concept of what is gender, what is a woman and what is a man and when do you become one, is a
Mm.
really complex thing now. And I mean,
Yeah.
teenage kids are already going through so much, and then you throw that layer
Yeah.
on
I
top
know.
of them. And,
Yeah.
like my poor head explodes and I'm 40, let alone
Yeah.
trying to grapple with that in high school. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, essentially what it comes down to is me being myself.
Hmm.
I don't see being a man as particularly anything that is, a certain way or a certain look. Obviously, there are masculine characteristics and there are
Yeah.
feminine
Yeah.
characteristics, and you can go to whatever. But, I think in terms of being true to yourself, being authentic to what it is that makes you feel like you represent yourself
Hmm.
is what makes me a man.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to hide myself anymore. I'm not trying to fit into someone's ideal. I just am who I am. So like,
Yeah.
I have a tattoo because that's what I've always wanted, and I got dragons because I like dragons. Like, and that's just me. It's just being true to myself, really.
Mm. Well, to say you had no answer, that's a great answer. So, so to come up with it on a spot, I'm pretty impressed. No, and I think that's the thing. I think because we sometimes like to cling to or people like to give other people labels, and I think what we're finding now is because anybody can be anything or anyone, it confuses a lot of traditional people or people that have felt life in a certain way, and they maybe feel uncomfortable with that. But I do think that the truest thing is to label yourself as you, as the person that you are and you want to be, really. And I think that's hopefully. I know we've got some issues in the US at the moment and a few other
Mm,
places, but hopefully that's where society is going. That people, we almost forget that tags and labels, and we just accept people for whoever they are, then
Mm,
that
and
that would be
I
a
guess
good
the
thing.
important thing too is like the idea of masculinity and the presentation that I put out is what I
Yeah.
perceive to be
Hmm.
masculine.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I'm gay, I'm attracted to the same sex,
Hmm.
you know, so for me, I'm attracted to masculinity and the qualities that I think make up a
Yeah.
masculine man, which is in turn I try to reflect in myself. So, you know,
Hmm.
I'm very honest about being vulnerable, being emotional, being
Mm.
open and honest and stuff. And these are traditionally not masculine traits. You know,
No,
these, you know, stoicism, being like suppressing, putting, not talking
absolutely.
about things,
Yeah.
just having a stiff upper
Mm.
lip. You know, they were masculine traits. So you
Yeah.
know, changing the idea of what is a man and what traits come with a man is something that I think just happens
Mm.
as you learn to accept to be yourself and put yourself forward.
Mm. So after having a difficult start and then difficult relationship, then go through the Navy and then becoming more sure about who you were and being more confident, it's still, to my mind, a relatively big step to say, right, yeah, I'm going to be an OnlyFans creator. That's what I'm going to do. What was it that inspired you to go into the industry, and what was, were you thinking about it for a long time, or was it a sort of just somebody else
No,
suggest
not
it?
at all.
What was okay?
I mean, I had done some work in New Zealand in film and
Mhm.
TV. I'd moved back and I met my partner, Sam Brownell, in Canberra, or ex-partner, I should say. And sort of, you know, COVID sort of happened.
Mhm.
This is around, when did we start? 2019, 2020, kind of at the height of COVID. And OnlyFans, it was sort of mentioning, you know, the word OnlyFans was coming up, but it wasn't quite as ingrained as it is now.
Yeah.
And having got the time, I jumped online and started having a look at people's profiles on this platform called OnlyFans, which is essentially, for people who don't know, is like a Facebook social networking and for porn.
Mhm.
And I saw the videos people were putting up, and you know, the quality was not great, but they were making tons of money. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, we have time. We have a we have a phone. Maybe we should start putting some videos up. And the main precursor was that our photos, like our nudes from our dating apps, essentially were already on blog sites that people had put up. Like people go through dating apps and they take screenshots and they were putting them up on blog sites that would be like
Okay.
guysofgrinder.com. And
Okay.
so I thought, well, let's reclaim some of that and make some
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
from our image instead, because our nudes are already out there, so we may as well make some money off it. And we never really intended it to go much further than that. It was really just a little bit of extra money, really to
Mhm.
provide, you know, some supplemental income to go on holidays. And and we just started small in our place, and there was really only a handful of people at the time in Australia that we could do collabs or collaborations where you
Mhm.
link up with other people. My partner Sam and I, we had an open relationship, so that wasn't an issue to engage with other people.
Mhm.
And but we made the decision early on to head overseas and to London, because that's where the majority of big gay OnlyFans creators who had sort of started a few years earlier than us were. And yeah, I think it was 2021 we may have headed over to London around
Mhm.
June. And I'll actually be headed there this year, so it marks like a 4 year or 5 year
Mm.
anniversary. I'm not sure, but but this will be my first time without Sam, because we separated at the start of
Yeah.
the year, so it'll be a bit bittersweet. Um, but I mean, it sort of just grew from there. We just started putting videos up. We got subscribers, and then once you realize people start paying you money, and then it goes from $100 a week to $400 a week to $2,000 a week, you're thinking, wow, this is really
Yeah.
something. So, but now everyone's got an OnlyFans, you know. So,
Yeah.
um,
It's that's the thing I was going to say. Is it? I guess the positive thing is you have a brand and you're recognizable and have a good big social media following and people know who you are. So I guess you've got that sort of step ahead. Lots of people that are coming on board now that are just sort of copying.
well,
But
I mean, but we felt that way when we started as well. You know,
yeah.
I remember, you know, looking at some of the creators. who are huge now, like Andy Lee, for example, PJ Knox, Teddy Bryce. These are all UK creators. Griffin
Mhm.
Barrows. I remember when we started OnlyFans 5 years ago, we started our social accounts and we were looking at their accounts and they seemed huge. And we're like, oh God, if we had those numbers. And now we've surpassed those numbers of where they were at that time, and they've obviously kept growing too.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were so surprised that, the first time we were in the UK, PJ, or one of my first scenes was actually with Andy Lee in the UK, and so like the fact that these creators actually took time out to come and visit. I think for us, we had what was behind us was that we were Aussies. We
Yeah.
were
Yeah,
visiting,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
we
It's
were
different.
we were a commodity that was outside of the
Mhm.
market and was fresh. It was the first. I think we were like the first sort of Australians to kind of do that as well.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it pushed us out to the international market and gave us a really good head start. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, absolutely, like the market is quite oversaturated now, and but for us, it's been a lot of time building up those socials and that
Yeah.
brand. Mm.
Mm. And what's the balance between sort of regular income from people that just subscribe to people that want sort of private or want individual things? Do you get a lot of people that want particular scenes or particular photos or particular things individually just
Um,
for them?
it's very different to a straight OnlyFans platform.
Okay.
I think going back to the gay community,
Hmm.
we are very sexually free and liberated in the
Yeah.
community, whereas traditionally in straight communities, sex isn't as accessible. Straight men do expect to pay for sex. So there are strip clubs, there are
Yeah.
like brothels, like you can go
Hmm.
online and pay for things. But in the gay community, sex is very free, it's very fluid. You can go to a gay bar and there's usually a dark room where you can go and have sex. You name a straight bar that has a dark room, you'd be
I've
hard
never found one.
pressed.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
sure, I'm sure there's
Really
a
hard to.
few, but like
Mm.
you would be hard pressed, and it's something that's quite unusual. And so when it comes to consuming content online like that as well, I feel like the gay community doesn't really want to fork out a lot of money because they don't feel like they should have to because
Yeah.
it's not something that is gatekept from them.
Hmm.
So the money in terms of gay creators is never going to be as high as what you do with your Bonnie Blues and things like
Hmm.
these massive creators who are all female, by the way. You look at like the top OnlyFans
Yeah.
creators,
Yeah. Yeah.
millionaires, they're all women. So,
Yeah.
because they know that men will pay and the straight men will log on with the budget to engage with that DM. But for the gays, that's generally just a subscription. They want access to
Mhm.
everything on your wall. We will do some pay-per-view, and I do get requests, but generally they'll be for more obscure things that
I
they
can imagine.
might have a very particular kink or fetish
Yeah.
for that's hard to get,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and so they will pay for that.
Mm. It's funny when I've talked to a couple of female creators on OnlyFans, and they say
Mm.
when they get requests through, you said you wouldn't believe how scripted some of them are. Literally, they'll send through a script and they'll ask to wear certain things and do certain things for like a 5 minute, 10 minute video. So, oh my goodness, it's harder than doing a porn
Y-
film. It's
Yeah,
they expect so much for their $200 or whatever. It's
the custom
yeah,
requests are generally very specific, I've noticed.
yeah,
Like very like down to like the angle or like particular
mhm,
words or colors or even
yeah,
people have sent items to wear. And it's like very, very specific
mhm,
instructions. I remember early on one guy would send us hypnotism videos, and I think like he would curate for weeks the script of that the hypnotism would, and curated a sort of course to do. Like he wanted a
mhm,
series of videos and to build on one of the others, and he it was him delivering those scripts and
mhm,
stuff to us to follow. But in turn, by him doing that, that's what he enjoyed. Not
mhm.
particularly the final result. I think he enjoyed the preparation into that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But it's
Mm.
that engagement, isn't it? They're sort of talking to somebody that's on screen, and they're going back and forth, and they feel that they become intimate with you in that way, as opposed to the physical way. Just having that, and that's what OnlyFans allows, I guess. Whereas porn's been around for a long time, and I
Yes.
know. it's things like Pornhub and the companies they own. It's extraordinary. So I think Pornhub gets 4 billion hits a month, which is
Mm.
extraordinary. 4 billion, and it's a massive data play, and it's not a great platform. It's not great for their performers or anybody else really. But they
I am on
it's
Pornhub.
great one way.
I am on Pornhub, so
Yeah, no, I love
yeah,
it. You have to be. It's like something that you think,
yeah.
oh, is it annoying, but I can't not be on it. But I think for the Pornhub and other sites like that, it's a very much a one way dialogue. Whereas OnlyFans and loyal fans, places like that, they've allowed this sort of two way dialogue with because we can't talk to actors, in real life that do make standard films and things. But as you're talking to somebody in OnlyFans, wow, this person I've seen on that screen, or they do this and do that, and we're having a conversation and they're listening to me. That's what drives it, I guess.
Yeah, and look, if you're, I mean, if I was in my bedroom as a teenager and I was closeted and I had access to something like OnlyFans where it was my ideal
Yeah,
crush or something and I was able to interact and engage with them, 100% I would have been I would have been
yeah,
there, you know.
yeah. And your parents saying, "What's his charge on the credit card?" Oh, I don't know if you got. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Yes. And you mentioned this before, and I saw it on another podcast, which I found really, again, interesting, naive, stereotypical. But you're obviously a big, beefy guy, incredibly fit, look great. And I found it interesting that on one of the podcasts, I think somebody said, "What's your kink? What are you into?" And he said that you love to be submissive and passed around by a group of guys, and he's sort of used by them. And the reason I raise it is when I talked to a dominatrix a few weeks ago in the straight world, and they've all said that men come to them to be submissive because
Mhm.
they feel they can't ask their partner. They can't talk. They obviously can, but they feel incredibly uncomfortable talking to their partner about it because of this stereotype masculinity that they have that men are supposed to be. Just a terrible word, dominant and macho and in charge of things. But when they want, and she said, yeah, we get some incredible men that come to me and they're amazing. And a lot of them, it's not about just the sex; it's about being submissive to somebody just for an hour or 2 hours, not having to take charge and be in control on things. And is
Well,
that?
I
But he
saw a
said,
really
in the gay world, it's much more fluid, and it wouldn't be such a well. It's obviously not such a hurdle to talk about that.
I think like that obviously there are still extreme kinks, but I saw a really interesting thing on Instagram today where
Mhm.
explaining kinks where it's not necessarily what you want, but it's what you could never have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and therefore your brain fills it in as a fantasy because it's something you don't
Mhm.
have, and then it becomes a kink that you pursue. So in my instance, I guess, being like the center of attention, being desired, being like passed around by guys, that's something I didn't have growing up. I didn't feel that sense of connection or that want or whatever because I felt with those masks I was isolated and separated.
Mhm.
Whereas now I can put my kink is exhibitionism, is being
Yeah.
passed around, is being on display, is being admired, all of these things, and being really submissive because I am a big guy. So, and it makes sense that a lot of other men, they may be in these roles of authority or power where they're the ones that are in control. And actually, what they really want is to give up control, even just for an hour, just to,
Yeah.
be completely like be at the whim of somebody else just to feel like that sense of release or, just to be not even validated, but just to like not have to be able to step outside their normal life and experience something different for a little bit to have that reprieve, It's like
Mm.
taking a breath and letting go. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
very interesting dynamic. And I would say that, doing the thing that I like, it's not something that I've always liked. It's something that's just come about as I've become more attuned with my sexuality and
Mhm.
pushing my boundaries in content and as I step through my career in OnlyFans. But it would still be something that is not, everyone's flavor or quite shocking in the gay community as well. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, like this weekend, I'm performing like a live sex show at a club, and it's for me now. It's not too much to get up in front of thousands or hundreds of people and do a live sex show. But if you had to come to me 5 years ago and asked me to do that, I would have clutched my pearls. Like, I would have
Yeah.
been like, I can't do that. So it is just a slow erosion of building that confidence up and that experience as well.
It's funny, isn't it? I think this. people's second biggest fear after death is doing something in public, whether it's public
Mm.
speaking or public or on a stage or whatever. Then and you're taking it to the sort of nth degree, sort of, I guess, yeah, giving people that the most sort of intimate side of yourself. But, well, in terms of performance, I guess, I mean, I guess it is a performance like acting. It's not, you're not necessarily giving. You said, do you have a sort of persona, or it's just you the same?
I mean, definitely, I think you are right in that porn is still a performance. So even
Yeah.
when, even though it is amateur, you still are aware that there is a camera, that there are people
Mhm.
watching, and particular things are going to look good and work better. So sex in everyday life, if you were just to film that, sex is very messy. It's not
Yes.
glamorous. It's
No.
it's often short-lived.
Yeah.
There are it doesn't look great if you were to think, but once you put a camera in there and you start to basically hype it up, or you kind
Hmm.
of what's the word? You take it a little bit further, and then you
Yeah.
start to
Yeah.
put on a bit of a persona because it
Hmm.
translates better. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not authentic. It's just that we do have a cinematic language when it comes to consuming porn of certain
Hmm.
beats that people expect to hit because that's how we've been trained to consume things in the media as
Yeah.
well. And if you don't hit those beats, it doesn't. It falls flat. So you got to sort of
Hmm.
deliver, but at the same time, you don't want to be like completely erode and just go completely polished because then you may as well. That is the studio system. This is
Yeah. Yeah.
amateur. So you want to bring yourself into it a little bit, but I guess making sure that you still want to have a little bit of a protection there, that you're not completely
Hmm.
vulnerable, because you still got to kind of put a bit of a front on the performance and step into it, so that
Mm.
you can leave it. You can step
Hmm.
back out and be like, well, that was me performing. This is now me. As me. And so there's sex that I have on stage is very different to the sex or that I have with my partner when it's just us.
Okay. Slightly less loud and less, yeah, less. It's funny
No,
when I talked to a really cool lady called Tara Winters, who's really some great porn, and she was saying, "Oh my god, if people watched us actually filming something when it's cut every 5 minutes, and the poor guy's got to get it up again, and we sort of film 8 different angles, and we film the sort of come shot at the beginning, not at the end, and we do all this stuff. It's then when it's edited together." First of all, you see it, and bloody hell, how can that guy keep going for so long? Wow, how can? And it's not. They've stopped it, and it takes a day to film a 15-minute scene. And she was saying it's just like you say, you're not watching people having sex, you're watching people perform as people expect. And
I
certainly
do.
certainly straight porn, it tends to be blowjob, missionary, doggy, reverse cowgirl. That tends to be the order. That's it. You watch that, it's finished, it's done, and
Yeah.
you generally finish on somebody's face, and that tends to be it. But it's not how normal, regular, day-to-day sex with your partner is as such. Well, it's not
No,
my
and
experience anyway.
And to be honest, something that like so when we started OnlyFans, we did just kind of have a camera and was just filming
Hmm.
us doing it, and then as we sort of got into some more collabs and along, our stuff has become a lot more polished.
Yeah.
And actually, some of the things that I enjoyed was a lot more of that amateur home video style porn where it isn't really
Yeah.
polished. It is a bit more gritty, it is a bit more real, so
Hmm.
and raw. So I've started to try and do a lot more of that now. Go
Mm.
back, and actually, it doesn't have to be held by someone else. Sometimes having the camera, the phone held by you, being in the
Hmm.
scene, just puts the person closer there and into that perspective. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's a bit hotter because otherwise, yeah, you can just go to the studios and see like a nice multi-angle
Yeah.
scene
Yeah. Yeah.
and
No, if you go into the sort of categories of porn, and some of the most viewed are amateur, because like I say,
mm,
people want to feel, even though some of them aren't, but you want to feel that it's something that's sort of it's happened, and you're almost sort of watching through the window type thing. It's not this big production that has had sort of 20 people doing the hair and makeup and everything else. It's something that
mm.
it feels a bit more real, I think, really.
Well, I think that's
Um,
one of the other things what's made it so successful too is that generally um,
dog.
in the studio system you had to look a particular way,
Yeah.
and be cast because of a certain looks. Whereas you can kind of find an audience now for your niche and your look, depending, you
Yes.
don't have to subscribe to what it is that
Hmm.
someone else is looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. 'Cause, Tara's covered in tattoos. It's beautiful, and I've got lots of tattoos as well. And she was saying it was she could only either get work as a sort of in the goth niche or
Mhm.
tattoos. It was quite niche stuff. Whereas OnlyFans, yeah, it's not something people care about, or maybe they do and they like it, but it's not something that puts producers, directors off. I know tattoos now off because she got too many to cover up with makeup and stuff. She looks fabulous, but it's not something that was she was getting work because of that. Now she's getting more work because of her OnlyFans platform performing well. So it sort of goes back, I guess, really.
It's a feedback loop.
It is. It is. And if you're listening, and you've done a hell of a job in terms of a couple of guys, forgive me, relatively amateur coming at this, and yeah, we'll give that a go with the phone, and then building to where you are now on OnlyFans. And are there particular things that really blew it up at one stage and another stage? Was it the collabs you were doing? Was it the sort of the uniqueness of you being Australian? What was it that sort of pushed you through where you are
Yeah,
to where
I
you are?
mean, we definitely play on being Australian. And for us in Australia, we have tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
We also are not or when people sort of display their Australianism, I
Yeah.
guess, it's kind of frowned upon. Like the US is very patriotic. They're always flying their flag and stuff. We're a
Yeah.
little bit more, reserved in that
Hmm.
respect. If we see someone kind of out there pushing the
Yeah.
thing, we kind of feel like, it's a bit corny and like, they're dipping into what is the narrative to be Aussie.
Hmm.
Um, but a lot of people for us, we realize like our core audience is not Australian. We are not
Yeah.
looking to capitalize on Australians subscribing to us. We're looking at our biggest audience is actually the US and Brazil. And for us, being Australian is a point of difference in a very big
Hmm.
market, and it is something that we can draw on aspects of ourselves which are
Yeah.
authentic. I did grow up in the outback. My ex and still business partner Sam is an Indigenous creator as well. So
Mhm.
being able to draw on those aspects and push it forward and wrap it up in Australian branding meant that all of a sudden it wasn't just Kobe and Sam's sort of thing. It's like, oh, it's the OnlyFans Aussie boys. It's like the
Yeah.
Aussies are coming, whereas everyone else sort of doesn't quite push as hard as us on that. But that was a very, I guess it was very meditative. It was very like, we
Mhm.
did it on purpose.
Yeah.
When we did it as a point of difference to really separate ourselves and sell ourselves to the overseas market and have an appeal, because there
Mm.
wasn't a lot of Australian creators at the time, and the ones that weren't really pushing, an Australian brand, if that
Mm.
makes sense. And one of the things that
Absolutely.
we love is like my first sexual experiences was actually cruising, which for people who don't know, cruising is, or dogging, I think it's called in the UK, but it's
Yeah.
basically going to public areas where
Mhm.
people know to hook up and have sex. And like for the gay community, that could be like a particular truck stop or a toilet or a park at night. And one of the things we really tried to do early on too was film in these cruising spots outdoors, to kind of not just so we could just kind of showcase a little bit of the Australian scenery. Our stuff later moved into the bedroom, but we really want to try and push it to go back outdoors and film content outdoors. So that's kind of the next aim for next year, is to I'd love to go around Australia and film in multiple outdoor locations. So,
Well, there's some incredibly beautiful places in Australia. And
well,
I guess the good thing is, in terms of market size, you got, what is it, 22 million people in Australia? And you got
I
350 million in the
think
US, and you've got
26 now. Yeah, yeah,
26 million now. Oh my
something.
goodness, you're getting big.
Yeah.
But you think, well, if you take Australia and put it on a map, it's the size of the US or the size of Europe, and in
Mm.
Europe and the US, we've got 300 million plus. So yeah, just having that, yeah, I think it's such a sensible idea to go. People always think, well, you should always start local, start with what you know. But no, I think with that sort of market, I think the US and obviously English speaking helps massively. So the US, UK, English is everybody's second language.
Well, you don't really
So,
need to have any language to do
well,
porn.
that's true. Yeah, it's not. They're not necessarily watching for the dialogue, really, are they? I suppose.
Which is one of the reasons why I have started to do a lot more podcasts because,
Uh-huh.
people, they consume the porn or they see you on socials, but they don't feel like, even though they kind of have access to you, if they subscribe to OnlyFans, it's still got a very narrow field because
Uh-huh.
they're looking to get off generally. And, people want to know more and more. When you're following someone, they find it really interesting to find out more about your personal life. Where's this
Yeah.
person come from? Rather than just, me, I can't really give much away in a scene when I'm just kind of grunting and so,
No, it's not
um,
really sort of. Yeah,
so,
it's not really getting to the
so,
heart of it. So.
so these platforms have been really good to be able to just go into things a little bit more and talk about like why it is that we do the things that we do and why we
Uh-huh.
have the scenes that we have and why we work with the people
Mm.
that we do.
Mm. And how do you expand the brand going forward? Do you launch a line of Kobe sex toys? Do you launch clothing line? Do you launch what? So how can you expand? Because a lot of content creators, etc., have their own line of toys and dildos or vaginas or whatever. So
Yeah.
what
I
are you looking at in
mean,
terms of expanding the
I
brand?
don't I don't have any particular long-term goals of where I want to go because, had I have tried to predict this 5 years ago, I probably would
Yeah,
have
it's true.
never have thought that. So I
Well,
don't know
you
where
wouldn't
I'm going to go.
you wouldn't have predicted this next weekend coming out with live
No,
sex stuff 5 years ago, I
but
guess.
like I guess for me the way that I operate is that I just continue to build on what we've got, and if
Hmm.
an opportunity comes by, I'll do anything to try and pick it up and go with it.
Yeah.
So for now, I do have management, and that is
Hmm.
now starting to take me more into a lot more of the live performance space. So it is becoming
Yeah.
more of a presence at parties, putting on
Hmm.
shows. Going into the media, and so it's really been interesting that transition from being sort of making content, being in my office and doing it online now, to all of a sudden I'm actually now in front of people and engaging directly, whereas before it was always through a screen. So that's
Yeah.
taking quite a little bit of adjustment to kind of
Hmm.
get used to that, but it's sort of just the natural, just next step of an
Mm.
evolution, I guess. Um,
Mm.
but
And I
I've
think
got,
what people are looking for is that when they reach out to talent, etc., to do certain things, they want somebody that's professional, that's on time, that does all the sort of the boring stuff really, really well. So that they're okay.
yes.
This guy, or this girl is going to do all that stuff, and then right, we can just concentrate on the thing we want to work with them for. What they don't want to do is somebody that, yeah, somebody suddenly becomes too precious or too big for their boots, or just doesn't want it. They want somebody that's going to sort of deliver because there's a lot of choice out there. Not now you've got a relative niche, but they want somebody that can come and deliver. And if you can do that, and the word gets passed around, yeah, Kobe's always switched on. He's always bang on time. He's always delivers. Always looks in great shape. That's what people look for, isn't it? You get hired again and
100%.
again and again.
Yeah. And,
Mm,
I have no problems now. Like, I've already been hit up by way too many people, heading back to the UK. It's like, like, guys, I wish I could stay there longer and film with everyone, but I
yeah,
just, I just can't. And, but, and being in Australia is so far away. It takes so much time and
yeah,
energy to get to these places, unfortunately,
yeah.
but it's a good problem
You're
to
coming at a
have.
good time. The weather's very pleasant. It's not even too hot. You're not going to get. It's not too dry. Nowhere's air conditioned still. So if you expect air conditioning, yeah, you're out of luck still. But we just don't think about that. One thing I want to talk to a lot of people in porn creators and things. They always talk about the difficulty of dating outside of the industry.
Hmm.
And I wondered if you found the same. Do you date outside or inside? I think because she was talking a lot about being tested and being safe and all that kind of stuff. And just even when people say that they're, oh no, if you're in porn, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. At some point, they become less happy with it. I wonder if that was similar for you guys.
Yeah, well, I guess it was a bit more, it was a bit different for us because
Yes.
Sam and I started our journey together
Yeah.
and we built the brand together. And
Hmm.
and so we were sort of, I guess, dating in the industry because we both started together and we started doing scenes. I think we've done over
Yeah.
500 scenes together. We still have so many that we haven't even released yet.
Oh my goodness.
But by doing that in a way, it did sort of erode the intimacy back at home because all of a sudden we were so
Yeah.
used to working together, and I can only talk from my perspective
Hmm.
anyway, but like we fell into routine, and then it came into like when it did come to being intimate, it was very, there was no surprises anymore because we had done every
I mean, there's
possible
500 things
scenario.
together.
Yeah,
Gosh,
well,
yeah.
we've done like, so many different scenarios and so many different
Yeah.
positions and all of that. Like, there's nothing really that was for us anymore.
Hmm.
And so my current partner, he doesn't do OnlyFans, and I wouldn't want him to step into that industry.
Hmm.
Simply because it is nice having something to yourself. And like I
Yeah.
was saying, the sex you do have on camera is very different to the sex you have when you are being intimate with your partner. And I think
Yeah.
I learned through mine and Sam's mistakes that actually probably it wasn't a good thing. Like we became, like we lived together, we worked together, we both worked from home together. So our lives just kind of
Yeah.
consumed each other and we coexisted,
Hmm.
and we sort of lost our identities because we both became amalgamated as this one
Yeah.
really tight-knit unit that worked great, but at the same time we sort of lost our individuality
Yeah.
in the relationship. So trying to make sure that I do keep some separateness, that we do keep a
Hmm.
little bit of individuality, and we do have some things that are unique to us and experiences that are still unique to each person. That everything is
Hmm.
always together is important,
Hmm.
and hence why I will be in London by myself, while my partner is
Yeah.
in Italy with a mate of mine. So he can have
Nice.
his own adventures, sort of thing, and then I
Yeah.
can catch up, and then we can talk about it and debrief, and we have something to talk about.
That's just nice, isn't it? When you, no matter what the relationship is, when you sort of come home or you meet each other for dinner or whatever, it's like, well, so how was your day? And it sounds so mundane, but when you turn around and say, well, yeah, but my day was your day. So what do you mean? Literally,
Yeah,
you were with me every second of the day. But it is, yeah, sometimes that almost that boring stuff. Oh, you never guess what it was like when I went to the supermarket. You never
yeah,
guess when I was driving here and who I saw. It's just what? And because you're not doing it together, and you can. It's that's
yeah. It
yeah.
gives
That
you
was, I think that's one of the things I found hard during COVID. I think my wife and I and everybody was home together, so you never had any new news to tell anybody else. I
no.
think now, yeah, even the not very exciting stuff is quite exciting because you weren't there and you don't
Mm.
know what happened. And it's yeah, when you hear about Italy, you're probably going to be desperate to go there. When he hears about London, he'll be like, "Oh my god, did you do this? Did you see him? How was he? And what was that like?" It's yeah, it's absolutely it's something that you've done individually and you bring it together and sort of process it as a couple. I think that's really
Yes,
important.
yeah. Absolutely. It's right on the
Mm.
mark. And, like I think now, I still catch up with Sam. We go to the gym together because it's something we always did. But now, I see him for gym and we have something to talk about, like, because we don't
Yeah,
live together anymore.
yeah,
So, like all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've suddenly found stuff to talk about again, So,
yeah. Mm.
it is what it
And
is.
so you obviously you invest a lot of time in what you do. You're incredibly business oriented as well as everything else. How do you find time to unwind? How do you stay in good shape? Not just physically, because I can see that, but mentally as well. What do you do to sort of look after yourself?
Oh, a lot of therapy.
Yeah.
Look, I think for me, I've always like used work as a bit of an avoidance thing as
Yep.
well. So it's very easy for me to pile myself up with tasks to,
Hmm.
particularly if I'm struggling with something or not feeling particularly great, I'll kind of push those feelings away and I can just keep myself busy with tasks. And when you're running
Mm,
your own business, it's very easy to find things to do all
absolutely.
the time. And so one thing that I've really started to focus on is actually to take time off, to
Hmm.
make sure that, when we do go on trips, because again, this was something with Sam, we'd always go on trips, but they're always very heavily content focused, and we never really
Yeah.
took time out for us. And so now I'm very much focused on that, making a part of the trip content focused, and other parts is non-content, so that we
Hmm.
we actually I get time off and I get time together, and just sometime and just scheduling weekends that are blocked out with nothing. Um, so that when a promoter does call and they ask, I do literally have in the calendar, like I think like every fourth weekend is like a blocked out thing, so I can fill all the other weekends in between. But I know that I'm going to have weekend where there is no engagements, just to give myself the opportunity just to come down, ground myself,
Yeah.
and not have to think, basically,
Mhm.
because otherwise it does just build and it can get to a point where it ruptures. And having that
Yeah.
self-care is really important.
It is
Mm.
in everybody's life, and it's certainly, especially when you're responsible for feeding yourself. You know, you're not on a salary. You're bringing in the money that you bring in, and it's very easy to think, oh, yeah, right, I'll take that one. Yeah, I'll take, yeah, they
Mm.
might not call again. Yeah, I'll take that one. And I think it's it's so important. And all the research shows now for mental well-being, physical well-being, everything, just to have that time. Not even to do anything if you don't want to. It's not about right.
Well,
I've got this weekend off. Right now, where are
yeah,
we going to go?
even
What we going to do this weekend? I said, well, let's just do nothing. Let's
even
plan to really chill out and we'll go to the gym. We'll go to nice restaurants. We'll hang out. We'll watch trashy
or
TV, and
even
then that's
even
it.
literally do nothing. Like I find my best days when I need a full reset is no
Mhm.
TV, no phone, no music, just wake up, have a tea, we'll sit in bed, just snap for a little bit and just actually be like, you know what, it's okay today to do nothing, not even to do
Yeah,
put the washing on. Just
right.
do nothing because I can do all of
Yeah.
that and pick up again tomorrow and start it all again. And it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to
Mm.
be behind on anything by doing one day,
Mhm. Mm.
when I can be so busy every other day.
Mhm. That's perfect. That's a great last question to answer, I think. So, if people want to find you, Instagram's a great place. You've got a great Instagram
Instagram, yeah,
account.
Instagram's a great start. It's just
Hmm.
Koby Falks, my
Yeah.
name. But you could literally just type my name into Google. I'll probably be the top hit at the
Yeah,
moment.
Kobe Falks Aussie is number one. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize how unique my name was. So,
It's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. So it's not a stage name. That is your name.
yeah, and like
Okay.
so I didn't I guess like it is uniquely Australian. I
Yeah.
thought it wouldn't be, but yeah, it is. Like a lot of people have never heard it before, so I kind of have to explain,
Yeah.
especially to Americans.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like
They've only ever heard of
Toby with
Kobe
a
with a
K.
B, Kobe Bryant, but not Kobe
Yeah.
with a
Well,
Y.
they always
Yeah.
say Colby, not Kobe. So.
Okay. Mm.
But yeah, Instagram is a great place to start. I'm on
Mhm.
Facebook as well, or Twitter, Blue Sky. I mean, TikTok as well, YouTube, and of course, OnlyFans.
Awesome. I'll put all the links into the show notes. Everybody can find you wherever they are. You're hard to avoid. You're everywhere.
Oh, thank you
Which is
so
good.
much for having
No, got
me.
pleasure. Well, have a wonderful trip to London. Maybe try and take the odd hour out if you're going to get. Like I say, you're not going to be in London all the time, so enjoy the
No,
parts you're going to go to,
yeah,
and make sure it's a holiday as well as a work trip. But
always.
no,
And you're
thank you
here
so
in
much for your
summer.
time. I really appreciate it. You were
No
very
worries.
open, very warm, very generous. So, yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.